The fluorescent lights flickered above Mike's head, the buzzing sound a perfect match for the buzzing annoyance in his brain. He stared at the peeling paint on the walls of Galactic Tour's Earth branch, the most depressing cubicle in the known universe. Or, at least, in this drab industrial park. The phone's shrill ring made him jump. "Mike speaking," he rasped, the words tasting like sandpaper. A panicked voice crackled over the line. "Mike! Johnson's got the Venusian stomach flu. You've got to cover the Exatril tour group. They land in 20." Mike groaned. Galactic Tours promised wonders. Pyramids, the Great Wall, the majesty of the Aurora Borealis. Mike got the occasional disgruntled businessman who'd missed a flight. Not a gaggle of hyper-intelligent, seven-limbed, color-changing aliens. 20 minutes later, Mike stood in the arrivals hall, hastily made sign reading Xatril, clutched in his sweaty hands. A cluster of beings resembling sentient lava lamps pulsed near baggage claim, their translator emitting excited chirps. "Welcome to Earth," Mike croaked out, wincing at his fake enthusiasm. The Xatril chirped louder, several limbs waving. He swallowed hard. Time to ditch the script. "All right, folks, buckle up, because you're in for the most miserable, pointless tour this side of the galaxy." The translator fell silent. Several eyes, were those eyes, blinked in confusion. Mike couldn't back out now. He herded them into a battered van and pointedly steered them into a monstrous traffic jam. "Witness," Mike proclaimed, voice rising above the cacophony of horns. "The pinnacle of human achievement. Hours wasted, just to sit in metal boxes." He gestured wildly. "Careers die here. Dreams turn to rust." The Xtrill blinked in a way that Mike was starting to suspect translated to "what the actual hell." The traffic eventually, begrudgingly, began to move. Mike, against his better judgment, felt a twinge of satisfaction. He wasn't going down without a fight. Next stop, the neon-drenched haven of Burger Barn. "Behold," Mike gestured dramatically towards the greasy counters and squeaky plastic booths, "the fuel of the human machine." He didn't spare them the details, dubious meat origins, the unsettling crunch of mystery toppings, the existential despair a supersized soda could induce. The Exatril poked at their fries, their usual iridescent glow turning a sickly shade of green. A bold one took a tentative bite of a burger, then promptly ejected it onto the floor with a startled chirp. Mike was on a roll now. "Onward," he cried, leading them into a sprawling city park. But instead of pointing out blooming cherry blossoms or a playful dog chasing a frisbee, he fixated on the pigeons. "Sky rats," he sneered. "Beady eyes, carriers of at least 12 known diseases." He detailed how they lurked on statues, leaving droppings as their only artistic statement. One of these trill let out a chirp that sounded suspiciously like a gag. By the time they reached the overcrowded mall, filled with screaming children, cheaply made clothes, and an earworm of a jingle blasting from hidden speakers, the aliens weren't even trying to hide their bewildered horror. Mike, to his own surprise, felt a strange sort of grim glee. He was no tour guide, he was an exposer of the human condition. The tour ended with a view that held no guidebook charm. Office workers spilling onto sidewalks, faces etched with exhaustion, bathed in the hazy glow of a smog-choked sunset. "This," Mike announced, "is where the magic happens. Dreams crushed, souls bartered, all for the sake of—" He searched for a profound ending, finally landing on paying the rent. The Exatril were silent as Mike deposited them back at the arrivals hall. Their usual cheerful glows were dimmed, some even sporting a grayish tinge. He braced for the complaints, the inevitable firing. But it never came. Instead, the next day, Galactic Tours' head office crackled to life. Mike was summoned, expecting the worst. What he got was far weirder. "Your tour, Mr. Johnson," the manager's voice warbled, a hint of bewilderment in his tone, "has caused, well, a sensation." Apparently, the Streel, instead of being scarred for life, had shared their experience with the entire galaxy. Suddenly, the Worst of Earth tour was the hottest ticket in the cosmos. Aliens wanted a taste of traffic jams, the questionable allure of fast food, even the aggressive indifference of pigeons. Mike was flabbergasted. Then, reluctantly, amused. He was rebranded not as the cheery tour guide, but Earth's honest expose, the man who dared to showcase the mundane misery of the everyday. He became a reluctant celebrity. Aliens lined up, eager to have Mike snarl about rush hour or wax poetic on the futility of laundry. He even got interview requests from baffled intergalactic news channels. Mike remained undeniably grumpy about the whole thing. But, tucked under that grumpiness, was a flicker of something new. Maybe not pride, but a sort of perverse satisfaction. He was the galaxy's worst tour guide, and damn it, he'd earned the title. Life after his accidental fame was, well, bizarre. Mike found himself fielding requests for more offbeat tours, the soul-crushing lines at the DMV, the baffling choices at the supermarket. His rants, translated into dozens of languages, echoed in space stations and star cruisers. One particularly humid afternoon, as he led a group of shell-shocked insectoid tourists through the horrors of rush-hour public transport, he spotted a familiar face. It was Sarah, the barista from his local coffee shop, the one with a smile too cheerful for a Monday morning. Hey, she stammered, a blush creeping across her face. Big fan. Your pigeon commentary? Absolute gold. Mike, the great exposer of human absurdity, was suddenly speechless. It wasn't the adulation, though that was still pretty weird. It was the way her eyes sparkled, and not in the horrified yet fascinated way his usual audience did. Later, over microwave dinners, Sarah confessed, Your tour? It was like realizing you're not alone in the madness. It hit him then. His rants, his expose on the absurdity of existence, weren't a mark of failure. They were a connection, a universal cosmic joke that made the traffic jams and greasy burgers a little more bearable. Maybe, just maybe, there was a strange sort of beauty to be found in the shared mundanity, even if it took a galaxy of aliens to show him. And so, Mike continued his reign as the galaxy's worst tour guide. But with every snarky comment about malfunctioning vending machines or the soul-numbing beige of office carpets, there was a newfound lightness in the snark. Because somewhere out there, someone would nod in shared understanding, and maybe even chuckle a little at the glorious absurdity of it all. The ripple effects of Mike's newfound fame spread outwards in ways he never could have predicted. Inspired by his honesty, a trend of worst of tours began across the galaxy. Zorblonians showed off the mind-numbingly long queues at their bureaucratic centers, while the famously elegant Marelians unveiled the surprising horrors hidden within their designer boutiques. Intergalactic relations warmed in an unexpected way. Overshared complaints about malfunctioning coffee machines and existential dread brought on by tax season. Aliens and humans alike found common ground. Suddenly, those baffling cultural differences seemed a bit more relatable. Mike found himself a reluctant icon, featured on talk shows and the subject of think pieces debating the cultural impact of misery tourism. He still grumbled and swore traffic lights were out to get him personally, but there was a new warmth behind the complaints now. One evening, years later, Mike stood on a balcony overlooking a strangely beautiful Earth sunset, a swirling mix of smog and vibrant color. He wasn't alone. Sarah leaned against the railing, a steaming mug of something that was probably tea in her hands. You know, she mused, I used to dream of seeing the aurora, or those floating cities on Andromeda. But then I showed you the majesty of rush hour, Mike finished for her, a small smile playing on his lips. Then you showed me that there's wonder in the weirdness, she countered. That we're all just fumbling along, whether we have 2 legs or 7. Mike turned and squeezed her hand. It was calloused, scarred from years spent making coffee and enduring the daily commute just like the rest of them. He found it perfect. He was still the galaxy's worst tour guide, but somehow he'd also become a beacon of something else. Not hope, precisely, but a sort of solidarity, a cosmic chuckle in the face of the mundane, the maddening, and the strangely beautiful absurdity of simply being alive. The fame started to wear thin after a while. Mike craved the comforting anonymity he'd so angrily railed against in his previous life. And Sarah, always attuned to his moods, understood. "Let's ditch this whole scene," she suggested one day, eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "You've shown the galaxy how miserable we can be. Now let's show them something different." Mike was intrigued. Sarah, bless her overly caffeinated heart, always had a plan. They left the city, the crowds, the constant barrage of interview requests, and settled in a small coastal town where the biggest drama was usually a squabble over the best fishing spot. Mike traded his tattered tour guide badge for a pair of well-worn overalls, and Sarah swapped her barista apron for a gardening trowel. Their new endeavor wasn't flashy. It was a simple cafe tucked away on a cobblestone street overlooking the restless sea. Mike, disgruntled baker by necessity, grumbled his way through perfecting sourdough, and grumbled even more when customers actually seemed to enjoy it. Sarah, with her infectious laugh, charmed locals and the occasional disoriented alien tourist alike. News of Mike's disappearance sparked a fresh round of intergalactic buzz. "Galaxy's worst tour guide goes into hiding," screamed the headlines. Some speculated he'd finally succumbed to the existential dread of his own tours. Others theorized that he was living in disguise amongst the pigeons, a feathered king. The truth was far simpler and far sweeter. Life smelled of freshly baked bread and the salty tang of sea air. Evenings were filled with the creak of their porch swing, the rhythmic lull of the waves, and Sarah's head resting comfortably on his shoulder. One day, a sleek spaceship landed near the cafe, causing a stir in the sleepy town. Out stepped a familiar group of Zitril, their once vibrant hues now muted with an air of melancholy. A translator device beeped out a hesitant plea. "Seeking not the worst, but the rest?" Mike looked at Sarah, a silent question in his eyes. She smiled, her warmth reaching all the way to the anxious aliens. "Come on in," she said. "Let's talk about what comes after misery." Inside, over mugs of strong coffee and slices of still warm cinnamon bread, the story spilled out. Inspired by Mike's disgruntled honesty, the galaxy had gotten hooked on the spectacle of the terrible. It became a competition, a race to unearth the most outrageous, most soul-crushingly awful experiences the universe had to offer. The Satriel had arrived seeking something else, a balm to the cosmic burnout. And so, a new tour began. Not one of misery, but one of simple things. Baking bread under the warmth of a rising sun, the quiet satisfaction of mending a holy sock, the laughter shared between old friends over a pot of long-simmered stew. Mike, the galaxy's most reluctant guide, found himself showing aliens not the worst, but the quietly profound, the kind of beautiful ordinary that faded into the background until someone pointed it out. And strangely enough, that too became a sensation. The best of the barely noticeable tours were a far cry from Mike's former rants. There were no frustrated monologues about faulty ticket machines or the existential despair of the weekly grocery shop. Instead, it was a gentle exploration of the overlooked and the underappreciated. He taught his alien clientele the subtle art of noticing, the way sunlight dappled through leaves, the satisfying crunch of fallen autumn foliage underfoot, the warmth of a hand-knitted sweater on a chilly day. Sarah, ever his perfect complement, brewed teas infused with garden herbs and recounted local legends as the sun dipped below the horizon. Word spread, not with the frenzy of Mike's misery tours, but with a quiet reverence. Harried CEOs, Weary politicians and even the occasional jaded interstellar celebrity sought solace in the coastal cafe and its celebration of the small. One blustery afternoon, a spaceship of unusual design descended near the beach. Its occupants were a race known as the Lyrians, beings of pure energy said to have witnessed the birth of stars. Yet, even they seemed strangely depleted. Their ethereal glow dimmed. "We have seen wonders," their translated voice whispered through the sea wind, nebulae ablaze with color, the silent dance of black holes. But it has left us hollow. It was the closest thing to Mike's old rants that he'd uttered in years. Yet, beneath the cosmic despair, he recognized a familiar ache, the desperate search for meaning, for something that felt real amidst the vast, unknowable universe. The Lyrians stayed for weeks. Mike taught them how to feel the weight of a pebble in their palm, the coarse texture of sand beneath their bare feet. Sarah led them through moonlit meadows, buzzing with fireflies. The creature's silent symphony, more profound than any cosmic light show. When it was time for them to leave, their glow was subtly different, not brighter, but infused with a quiet warmth. "You have shown us," they conveyed, "that wonder can exist in a single grain of sand, if one remembers to look." Mike, the galaxy's worst then best tour guide, stood on the windswept shore and watched their ship vanish into the starlit sky. He was no longer the disgruntled voice of cosmic misery, nor the guru of the gently profound. He was simply Mike, baker of occasionally burnt bread, partner to Sarah, an inhabitant of this strange, beautiful, absurd little planet called Earth's. And for now, that seemed like enough. Life continued its gentle, messy rhythm in the little coastal town. The cafe became a haven, a place where the scent of fresh bread and laughter mingled with the echoes of intergalactic journeys. Some days were filled with the quiet satisfaction of a well-tended garden, others with the boisterous energy of visiting alien children eager to hunt for seashells. Mike never quite lost his tendency to grumble. The pigeons still earned his ire, and the faulty coffee machine was a frequent target of his muttered curses. Yet, the bitterness had faded, replaced by a sort of wry amusement at the everyday absurdities. In the quiet moments, as the sun dipped below the endless horizon, Mike would sometimes sit with Sarah on their porch swing. He'd feel the warmth of her hand in his, the familiar creak of the wood, and a sense of quiet contentment would settle over him. He thought sometimes of those initial tours, the rants about traffic jams and the despair of the ordinary. It had been a strange, twisted path, the way that misery had led to meaning. But that was life, wasn't it? A messy, unpredictable, ridiculously beautiful journey, best experienced with a sense of humor, a slice of decent bread, and someone to share it with. And so, the galaxy's worst tour guide found his unlikely happy ending, not amongst the glittering wonders of the cosmos, but in the quiet corners of an ordinary life lived extraordinarily well.